Yo, what is up, guys? It's Pedro here. So the Commanders have some unfortunate injury news regarding Sam Cosmi. Also, the Commanders have called up a player for the game tomorrow against the Raiders. Let's talk about it. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well. We're like 40 subscribers away from 16,000. It's been a while since we've been in this range, so let's do it. It's free, doesn't take too long, and also hype up the video. That's a new feature. Helps out the algorithm, all that good stuff, liking and stuff. But let's get into this right here. So Nikki Javala from the Washington, or I guess not the Washington Post anymore, The Athletic, just so used to saying Washington Post, but she reported, she was asked about Sam Cosmi from someone. I think she was doing an Ask Me Anything, and Mike S. asked her about Sam Cosmi because the earliest he could come back is after the Falcons game. So it would be after next week, so it would be week 5. So she said it would be later, even if he's medically cleared by week 5. I'd be shocked if the team threw him in immediately. It would put him at risk and the rest of the lineup at risk, or the rest of the line at risk, but really the rest of the lineup because, if he's putting the quarterback at risk, that's bad too. Cosmi hasn't taken a live rep since January, so he'd need a ramp up to get back in football shape. How long that will take is unclear. Coach Dan Quinn has been a stickler about return to play processes for players dealing with injuries, and there's no way he'll rush it with Cosmi. Certainly not after Washington gave him a $74 million extension last year. So, yeah, I agree. It makes sense what she's saying. They can open the practice window after that week 4 game against the Falcons. So, a little over a week from today will be when they can do that. So if they do that, then maybe they do a full week of, I feel like the earliest maybe they would have him come back is week 6. So a full week of practice, heading into that week 5 game, and then he doesn't play week 5, and then the next week does another full week of practice and then plays. I believe the PUP list rule and even IR is like 21-day practice window, so that's what it would be for Sam Cosmi. They could do the full thing where they just have him 3 full weeks of practice and then they play him, or even after that, like they bring him back onto the team, the active roster, but maybe they don't play him. So that's definitely another thing as well. So I agree with what Nikki said here. You don't want to rush him, put him at risk, and the rest of the line at risk, which would then in turn put Jaden Daniels at risk. So yeah, that's just my take on the situation. I agree with what she's saying, and probably give him 2 weeks of full practice, and then maybe he'll be back. So not week 5, it would be week 6, I believe. But again, that's still the earliest I believe he would be able to come back. I don't know if they can. I guess they would be able to open the practice window heading into that week 5 game. So a full week of practice there, maybe a full week of practice the next week, and then he's back. But it still might be another week or 2 after that if they really want to ease him into it, because it is a soft tissue injury. It's a ACL injury. You don't want to rush the guy back. Obviously he's super important, but you rather have him miss 1, maybe 2 more games and be really basically full strength when he comes back than him dealing with an injury and maybe he injures himself or the quarterback. So just this one especially, make sure he's fully good to go before you put him out there. That's kind of my take, and I believe that's what they're going to do. That's what Dan Quinn's going to do. So she said I'd be shocked if they threw him in immediately, and I definitely agree with that. And there could be some situations where he's on the 53-man roster, maybe inactive on game days for a little bit, just so that they can, ease him into everything. Maybe even have him as an emergency player or like a extra lineman on certain situations. So maybe he gets a few snaps, or maybe the first game they put him in for a couple series, something like that, to ease him into everything. But real quick, a word from today's sponsor. And a huge shout out to Sleeper for sponsoring today's video. So the Commanders have a huge game against the Las Vegas Raiders tomorrow. I do have 3 picks for this game. So Terry McLaurin, 3+ catches. I feel like that should happen. Pretty easy there. Alternate line. Also, Brock Bowers, over 56.5 yards. He had a little bit of a slow week against the Chargers, but I believe he'll bounce back this week against our team that just allowed a career day against Tucker Kraft and the Packers. And then Deebo Samuel over 44.5 yards is a 35% boost on this play. $10 for $43. So tail with me, guys. I have one each week at least once. So check out Sleeper. Use my promo code Pedro on Sleeper and get a 100% match up to $100. Meaning you put in 10, you'll get $20 total. A link in the description. Thanks again. Alrighty, so now let's talk about the player the Commanders called up, and then we'll get into some other big, injury updates I didn't talk about yesterday. Which yesterday I just talked about Andrew Wiley starting at right guard, which I believe is a good move. It was either him at right guard or right tackle, and they want to give Connor a little bit more time, which totally makes sense. So they're putting Wiley at right guard, and that of course makes sense. But they're elevating quarterback Antonio Hamilton Sr. Actually, Ben Standig had a typo there. He corrected in another tweet, but I wanted to pull up this one. So, that is the move they made because, they have Jonathan Jones who's on IR. And, so they got Lattimore, they got Mikey Sanders still, they got Trey Amos who, is a little bit banged up. He practiced, he's good to go, but, he has a little bit of a shoulder injury. And you got Noah Igbenogany. So he'll be the fifth cornerback. And, they bring in Antonio Hamilton Jr. or Sr. and hopefully, he doesn't have to play. Maybe he plays on special teams, but hopefully he doesn't have to play. The other options would have been Carlin Vigors, who I didn't really think did too well in not training camp, but preseason. They got Darius Rush, who they signed to the practice squad, who wasn't a part of the offseason for the Commanders, but they signed him after all, the major cuts were made. So that's kind of it. I was maybe, expecting a running back call up, but I think they're going to run it with, just run out with this team, see what happens, and, go from there. If they need to adjust, call up Donovan Edwards or Chase Edmonds, then they'll go ahead and do that. But right now they're chilling with, who they got. So let's go into some other injury updates. So going to have to scroll down a while for this one, but they have a bunch actually. So Jaden Daniels, he's out, but then we look at the other stuff. John Bates is out and Noah Brown is out. So that is bad. I mean, John, I was combining John and Noah Brown in his name. John Bates, obviously that's a huge loss. He's, one of the better players on this offense. He's not technically a starter, but, playing 12 personnel a lot. So he's out there a lot. And for him to be out is bad. He helps, in the run game tremendously, but also as a pass blocker as well. In terms of pass catching, he doesn't really add anything. They don't really give him the ball. But again, as a blocker, he definitely contributes. So it is a loss in the run game and, in the pass blocking game, with going up against Max Crosby, not having John Bates out there to help and chip is going to be bad. Because, as much as I like Zach Ertz, he's at this point, I don't think he was ever a really good blocker, and definitely now he's not. You can tell when you watch. He's just a pass catching guy. So he's not going to be able to help that much. And then you have, Ben Sinnott, who, doesn't seem like they trust him a lot, even with John Bates being hurt last week. Midway through the game, they didn't play Sinnott a lot. So it's probably going to be some Colson Yankoff playing. So we'll see what he brings to the table. Well, I know he switched numbers. He was wearing number 41. I believe he's like 88 right now or something like that. But, definitely a better number than he had before. So could be, even though on the stat sheet probably won't have anything, catching wise, Colson Yankoff could have, definitely could be a big part of this game against the Raiders. And then Jaden Daniels, obviously out for this game, but it is good though. He got limited on Friday. So that is really good news. You got Saturday, Sunday, and then, Monday, Tuesday rest. And on Wednesday, back out there for practice. And, they obviously do stuff on Monday and Tuesday, but for him, hopefully he's a limited, but maybe a more limited than he was on Friday because, limited is very subjective. You could do like one or two plays, and that's technically limited. So hopefully, by next Thursday, Friday, he's a full participant and ready to go against the Atlanta Falcons because we definitely need him, or else it'll be two revenge games for Marcus Mariota going up against the Raiders and the Falcons. The Raiders, they're good injury-wise. Brock Bowers was limited all week, but he was good to go. Jeremy Chin, revenge game for him, limited all week. And they got the Samarian Richardson, hamstring injury, cornerback questionable. Their cornerback room is not very good. Hopefully these Commanders receivers, tight ends, all of them feast. Remember, I got the Deebo Samuel over in this game, and then Terry McLaurin over 3 receptions. So tail with me on that. Definitely helps me out. Let me know if you guys do end up tailing the play. But yeah, overall, bad news with the Sam Cosmi stuff, but it's understandable. Hopefully he's able to come back week 7, week 8, something like that, which, when the injury happened after, a couple weeks, we weren't really expecting it to, for him to come back this early. So, coming back week 7-ish is actually better than probably a lot of us thought, right after the injury. But that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys new. Peace.